Well, here we are, almost a month since the release of Volume 1 of the 5th season of Stranger Things, and I'm just now getting around to talking about each of the episodes in depth. Whoops. In my defense, I was very sick around the time of release, and I'm only just getting around to catching up with everything I've missed. Today, we're going to start with Episode 1, The Crawl, which I've already partially made a video on, considering we saw the first 5 minutes already, but there's an additional hour and 6 minutes to talk about, so I guess we better get started. Also, before we go any further, I will say we're dealing with full spoilers here, because I binge watched it all at once when I first watched it, and it's been so long since it released that I'd actually be shocked to see the majority haven't watched it all, you know? So let's get started. We start off the episode with a flashback to the Upside Down, just to show what the hell Will was up to and the sort of life he's been living. Basically, he seems to have no food or water, is covered in grime with bad air quality, seems constantly damp and clammy, and is pale as all hell. He is not looking good, and it's not just because at times the CGI makes him look like a more advanced version of the Uncanny Valley character models from the Polar Express. The gist of the scene is that Will's hiding in Castle Byers as the Demogorgon hunts him, and when it finds him, he straight up shoots it in the face and runs up a tree. It follows him, he jumps to another tree and slips before his unconscious form is dragged off to see Vecna. I will say that in my opinion, the CGI of Will's face is probably at its worst when he's up the tree looking down at the Demogorgon, but as a whole, it did work out pretty well, didn't it? It's actually crazy to see how far this type of technology has come in the last decade or so. Growing up, I never would have thought to see this type of quality for a TV show at all, but here we are. I have to say though, Vecna is just not intimidating at all from a distance when Will gets dragged over to him and he comes out of the shadows. He honestly looks like a furless version of the Jim Carrey Grinch. For me though, the value of this scene is twofold. It fills in the gaps of what happened to Will and shows how he went from being loose in the Upside Down to being a prisoner of Vecna attached to that thing pumping the slugs into his stomach, and really hones in on the idea that all of this was some big plan. Will was meant to be found and saved to bring about what happens in Stranger Things 2. On top of that, the scene also lets Will have a hero moment of his own for a change, which is something he was sorely lacking across the course of pretty much every other season. He often seems stuck as a victim or a bystander, or at best, a tracking device to figure out if monsters are nearby. But here he gets to showcase how much of a badass he really is, which I think sets the stage for the final episode of the volume. It also makes me question how the hell this kid is even functional at this point, considering all the bullshit he's gone through. He got attacked by a random interdimensional monster and spent a significant period of time alone trying to escape it. He then suffers a bad fall from a tree and gets caught and slugged. When he's free, he coughs up slugs at home and eventually starts seeing visions, and then gets possessed. His possessed form ends up murdering his mum's boyfriend, who was always really nice to him, and from then on he's able to feel the presence of creatures from the Upside Down. All I'm saying is this is a recipe for a complete mental breakdown, and I'm honestly shocked he hasn't had one for real. I mean, the same could be said for a bunch of different characters, but Will is going through the wars. We get the opening credits after this, and this leads us into the Wheeler house in November 1987. And the first character we see is the new recast of Holly Wheeler, who's setting up the table for breakfast. She's distracted by something at the window, and you can see the reflection of somebody out there who she waves at, and of course they wave back at her. I have to say the Mr. Watson storyline has got to be the most obvious reveal of all time, right? I mean, we have a main villain who is known for getting in your head, and a previously minor side character getting a recast and screen time waving at some random guy out the window. I'm curious if there's anybody in the world that didn't think this was Vecna, because really, who else could it have been? That being said, I'm also not sure if you're supposed to think it's anybody else, and perhaps they intended the storyline to feel like this sense of impending dread and doom. Could it be that maybe? If that's the case, then I actually think it was rather clever. It's just, why hide his face, you know? We then get the reveal that the Byers have been staying with the Wheelers, presumably since the end of the last season, as they're in lockdown inside Hawkins, and obviously Joyce sold her house and they have nowhere to live. This was actually a fun little scene that eases you in nicely, and somehow makes you feel bad for Ted Wheeler of all people. I mean, let's be real, right across the course of the story, you're not going to care much about this guy. He seems like a pretty disconnected and somewhat lazy dad, and yet this scene allows you to completely feel for him and makes him seem so sympathetic. Same with Karen, although it's not like she needed that really, because she's always been a more fleshed out character who at least tries to engage with her kids. Ted, though, is forced to endure a massively noisy table, and all the man wanted was some bacon. And yet even then, even though he asks for it, everybody takes it before he does, and he just gets the tiny scraps. They then leave all the cleaning for Karen to do. I would also be wondering when the hell they're going to move out, because this is actually just insane and really rude. Also, Joyce just leaving when all she's going to be doing is manning the stopwatch for Al's training. That is pretty dodgy, not going to lie. That being said, whilst it's obviously annoying at the same time, I really like this opening scene, as it's nice to have some of that normal slice of life content before everything goes to hell. It's the same for when they leave and Mike, Will, and Holly are all cycling to school and they listen to the radio. It's just wholesome vibes that build you up for the upcoming dread, violence, and spooky vibes very nicely. Next, we check in with Robin and Steve, and yet again they've managed to snag jobs working together, and they're really making their way up in the world, aren't they? They've gone from serving ice cream at Scoops Ahoy to working at a video rental store, and now they're working at the radio station. Robin's the DJ who's working her 500th broadcast, and Steve is her producer, assistant. I don't know, he works with her and he handles the sound effects and that kind of thing. I have to say, this scene is just hilarious. Robin with her top tier monologue just giving us a bit of a humorous breakdown of what's been happening in Hawkins in the time since the end of the last season, and then Steve running around doing the effects. I lost it when he had that whistle thing playing into the mic. It's just excellent and gives you a fun little recap, whilst also giving you those slice of life vibes that the previous scene did, which in turn keeps building you up until the darker stuff hits and thus feels all the more heavy. I also love the reveal that the military have put this giant metal band-aid, as they call it, over the big fissure to the Upside Down that opened when Vecna briefly killed Max, and yet humans are doing what humans do best, and that is not listening to safety regulations. They're sledding down it, which is also just really clever writing because it feels extremely true to life and showcases a greater understanding of what people are actually like. It's also really funny to see military personnel have to chase these kids away when obviously they have so many bigger things to be worried about, like, you know, the interdimensional gate and the otherworldly threat that wants to bring about the apocalypse. I also enjoyed the reveal that Robin and Vicky are now dating, and that's very cute. I also love the really stressed look from Steve when she was talking about her romance. Got the vibes that he was afraid she'd accidentally out herself live on air. I just love their friendship. It's one of my favorite parts of the show, to tell you the truth. I also love that they're seemingly so codependent in terms of their working life. Part of me thinks that if they both get out of this season in one piece, they 100% are going to try to keep working with each other forever. The signal then goes on the fritz, and so Steve calls up Dustin on the walkie-talkie, and Dustin's not having it. He's cold, he's snarky, and he's just not having a good time of it seems. And I think it's clear it all stems from Eddie's death last season and the utter ruination of his reputation. He goes into school wearing a Hellfire Club shirt and has a very obvious chip on his shoulder, and even talks back to a bunch of bullies who confront him about it, and then talks some mad shit about screwing the lead bully's mum. I will say that at a certain point, the edge does make him feel somewhat unlikable, but I guess that's the point. He kind of is unlikable because he's lashing out and angry about the death of one of his friends, and that nothing's been done to avenge it or repair his reputation. I really like this because it makes it feel like there are actual stakes to Eddie's death, and that Dustin's character's been changed in a very real way over the course of the time skip, which I think works really well, and it's just really good writing. The bully pins him to the locker and starts ripping his shirt, which is when Lucas appears and the dude backs off. Damn, I was not expecting this aura off of Lucas, but at the same time, I guess it makes a lot of sense. During the previous season, it became clear that he'd become more athletic, and now as he gets older, he's not the same kid that was easily getting picked on at school. It's honestly crazy to see how these two characters have changed over the years, and it gets you a little bit nostalgic, you know? Also, in the wide shot when they're all walking down the hallway, it is very crazy how much shorter Dustin is than pretty much every single one of the other boys. Here they criticize him for constantly provoking the bullies by wearing that shirt and by talking back to them, because I think that Eddie wouldn't have given a shit what anybody thought about him to begin with, so Dustin's just drawing attention to himself and by extension to what they're doing. They're supposed to blend in, but of course Dustin thinks that they're not staying true to themselves or standing up to their friend Eddie by following Hopper's instructions. I have to say, I think I see both sides. I don't think mental health treatment was a top priority in small town Indiana in the 80s, so Dustin is clearly going through some shit and seems unable to talk about it and isn't feeling heard. That being said, the boys also are right. However, I did find it a bit funny that Mike's out there talking about how Dustin needs to focus up and that the best way to avenge Eddie is to focus on killing Vecna. He says this fairly loud and out in the open, with people walking past him in the hallway, which seems like a disaster waiting to happen, as Eddie is a suspected serial killer, Hellfire was a suspected satanic cult, and they're talking about avenging Eddie by killing somebody else. Come on, Mike, you gotta listen to your own advice and keep your head down. I know you're not meant to focus on that sort of thing, but for me, it was a little bit silly and immersion breaking. Why couldn't they have dragged him into an empty classroom or something like that? Still, I really like the dynamics on display in this scene, as it does feel true to each character and like it's building off of storylines and character arcs of the previous seasons really well. We move on now to our first look at 11, and I love the fake out this scene did with her running through the forest, and you think the cutaways to the soldiers chasing after somebody are for her. I was fully expecting some crazy action sequence and wondering how the hell she was going to get away from them. Was she going to kill somebody? After all, we saw her do that last season, so I'm thinking she doesn't care much about preserving these dudes who are trying to kill her. Fair enough as well, because the government has well and truly screwed her over multiple times, so why the hell should she be merciful? It's crunch time now. So I was very eager to see what was going to happen, and then you see the chopper, and shit gets real. I like that if you really focus and know what you're looking for, you can see that it isn't her they're chasing, but obviously if you're in the moment, you're on the edge of your seat, and it might not come to you. It didn't for me until they darted this random lady, and I found out it wasn't her. I feel so bad for this person too. She's walking through the woods, and suddenly she gets attacked by the army, and they start chasing her down, complete with cars and a chopper, and straight up shoot her with a tranquilizer dart. Then they drag her off anyway. Where are they going to take her? Hospital, hopefully. Then again, with these guys, I suppose there is always a chance they just dump her somewhere for her to wake up with nobody to believe her. Or they might just kill her too, which is not out of the realm of possibility either. They're actually such compelling villains, because They would be so useful if they wanted to work with Al, but they just want to control her. They want to use her, and thus they make all the wrong decisions. It makes them feel so hateable because you know that if they all work together, they would smack Vecna into the dirt, but since they don't, it makes it so much harder for everybody. It also sets you up to be really hyped when they finally get their just desserts. It makes it fun when Vecna and the boys roll up on them and shred them to bits. Villains fighting villains, thus buying the heroes a chance to escape or survive, is always a good time, and they plant the seeds here early. Then we see what Al was actually doing. She's running an obstacle course to try to be allowed to go with Hopper into the Upside Down. She manages to set a new record, but she's not satisfied and is quite closed off and angry, demanding that Hopper and Joyce set up the obstacle course for her to go again. I think the highlight of this scene for me is that Hopper and Joyce are treating her like their kid, and it's just cute vibes all around. Hopper and Al had pretty much no scenes last season after their relationship was one of the biggest parts of seasons 2 and 3, and so it's nice they have this and that it isn't just them arguing and screaming. You do want some wholesome vibes, at least from one of them. Plus, I also like that Joyce is still acting like a mother hen to Al because she pretty much was her mum for all of season 4 and the time skip from 3. They have a really nice dynamic, although I will say it made me sad when Al snapped at her about how she can't rest because Henry isn't. I mean, she is right about that, but it was sad to see. Next up, we see Murray infiltrating the quarantine zone under the guise of being a delivery driver. This is probably one of the more goofy elements of the story for me. Murray is a known associate of Joyce who is the adoptive mother of Al, and the military should know that, right? It's a surprise that they're not straight up following Joyce everywhere, seeing as that they know Al's inside the quarantine zone. Hell, why aren't they always following the Wheelers too? Because they were also known to associate with Al from season 1. But yes, back to Murray, he should also be a known quantity, and surely they'd have a file with pictures of who look like suspicious individuals to look at before allowing anybody in. On top of that, it doesn't look like they even searched his truck, which is convenient because he's smuggling stuff in, and he isn't even being very careful about it. It's honestly such a huge plot contrivance because the military seriously is not going to search a delivery truck entering a lockdown area like this. Come on now. We go from this to what is one of the cringiest scenes for me in the entire episode. Honestly, this is probably the storyline I dislike the most from Volume 1, and that is the lame love triangle. It seems that both Nancy and Jonathan work at the station too, and they still haven't managed to get the signal back online after it went on the fritz earlier, and since Dustin's being an edgelord to all his friends, they're shit out of luck, until Nancy finds the manual. Steve's getting up in her business, and I don't know, is it meant to be awkward or is it meant to have tension? She looked awkward to me. They go outside and realize they have to climb to the top of the radio tower to fix a signal, and so Jonathan and Steve enter a weird macho contest where they claim that each one's better suited for the task, and also refer to themselves in the third person. Good God! This is definitely not what I was interested in seeing at this stage of the game. Was anybody else? It feels like Jonathan's character arc and storylines have gotten worse and worse each season, and for now, this is no real exception. Meanwhile, Steve's best character dynamics and storylines are all his non-romantic ones. Hanging with Dustin and Robin are what made his character super popular across season 2 and season 3, so I can't help but feel that there's massive character regression too. It was already bad signs in season 4 when they started pulling this rabbit out of the hat, but now they're doubling down. I just hope they don't prolong it forever, you know? Also, this makes Steve look like such a dickhead too, because she's legitimately in a relationship, bro. It's just really cringy and does a disservice to all the characters involved. I will admit the race to the top was kind of funny on the first watch, but then you start thinking about it and it sinks in that this is one of their final storylines. A contest to see who gets the girl. I hope she dumps them both at this rate and moves on with her life. I mean, she doesn't really seem happy about any of this and turns away looking disgusted. Whilst they're doing their thing, Nancy and Robin go to speak to Murray, who's just arrived and who has brought a lot of goodies that are not well hidden. Grenades under the lettuce. Seriously. These border guys are not the best of the best, are they? Because Murray was not even trying here. He also brings news of a burn in the Upside Down to deliver supplies, so this will give Hopper time to go inside himself and try to find Vector. That being said, is it ever explained how the hell Murray even has this information to begin with? Where is he getting these documents? Does he have some sort of mole that's leaking him information or something? I feel that for this particular storyline, you can't pick too hard at it or it sort of falls apart, especially since it's necessary to set the scene for pretty much all of the events of the first volume. We head back over to the school to catch up with the party, with us first seeing Dustin, who heads into the reptile room, I guess, to say hello to Jake the Snake. Then it's over to his friends at lunch who are largely shit-talking him for his behavior over the last little while, and how he's been wearing the Hellfire shirt, he wants to restart the club to find the lost sheep, and how he has just no care about getting mixed up with those bullies. Dustin then turns up at the table and asks who lost their mind, and all three of them have to try to scramble to think of some excuse. And I just think there's no chance he actually believes they were talking about Andy. I mean, they all look so guilty, and he looks so pissed, but then again, that seems to be his natural state at this point. I liked this little sequence because it felt very real. This type of shit happens so much in real life, and especially at school where somebody's talking shit and then the other person walks in on it, and it's just massively awkward. With the teen characters, I really do feel like this season they're just nailing the social interactions. Thankfully, the awkward vibes are diffused by Robin's radio broadcast, which she uses to tell the rest of the team about the details of the crawl. Although I do have to wonder if she plays that same song every time she gets access to the information, because she's using very specific trivia here for their code, and if they've been doing this for as long as they say, surely somebody would have cottoned on or she would have run out of facts. So do we reckon that after each crawl they decide on a new code song for the next crawl or something? Still, I did think this was a very fun way to link between the different scenes without having to have various dialogue sequences where each character finds out the information themselves. Each of our 3 groups goes off to make their own plans, and here they have to intercut between the groups to break up the information, which was a really good move. I don't know, I just think it works better than having one big block of dialogue from a single character, especially when it's not a hugely interesting discussion, as whilst the plan is important, we're going to quite literally see it all play out on screen and see everybody in their different roles very soon, so it's not like it's key to hear it all. Thus, you cut between the different characters and it keeps you invested, or at least it did for me. Here we also learn about how they're handling the search for Vecna, which feels very slow and dangerous considering it's just Hopper going in there and doing it. We also see that Steve is somewhat doubting that Vecna's out there at all. They've done over 30 crawls and they haven't found any sign of him, and on top of that, they haven't seen any monsters at all. Plus, they set him on fire, shot him heaps, and he fell out of a window 3 stories. Not many people are coming back from that, but of course, we know he's not dead because his body's seemingly been enhanced by the Upside Down. Plus, that would be a pretty anticlimactic end to the season. Oh, I guess he's been dead all along. The end. Still, I think it was a pretty fair question. I also like that this scene highlighted the similarities between Nancy and Mike and their respective roles within their groups. The leader/strategist who is 100% on board with hunting for Vecna until the very end, and is able to fire up their team. Also, Dustin is so edgy in this scene as well. I want Vecna's heart on a platter. I do wonder if they're actually going to have any sort of interaction before the show's over. It feels like he has a big personal stake in this, but so do a lot of the characters, and there's only so much storyline to go around. I did like that when they all put their hands in, that Dustin is still engaging with his friends and laughing, and they're behaving like proper teenagers though. So far, the writing for the party is the most engaging in the story so far. Will then has a moment where he feels dizzy and out of it, and for a moment, I really did think they were going to have the Vecna return early, but nope. I also loved how protective the boys are over Will. It's some of the cutest shit in this show how much these guys care about each other. Then it's over to Holly, whose scene starts off with the same clips of the spinning sky that was featured with Will. I guess this is them trying to tell us that these two are linked in some way, but I'll be honest, I was too stupid to pick up on that on my first watch through, and so only on this subsequent one did I actually notice. After getting bullied by Derek, the teacher comes out and calls the class back in from recess, and Holly, instead of going inside, notices Mr. Watson, and so for some reason, she walks over to talk to him. I tell you what, somebody needs to inform this child that talking to random people is not a good idea. Was stranger danger not a thing in the 80s? The teacher notices she's not there, and she walks over to check on her and sees that Holly's in fact talking to nobody, which is even more evidence that Mr. Watson was Vecna. Vecna famously gets in your head, which Steve even mentioned earlier in the episode. The previous scene, in fact. The scene then cuts away and we follow up with some army dudes, which, I'll be honest, is probably the stuff I care least about, because I doubt it's going to be all that relevant to the end game, because I think Vecna's going to come and finish them off during Volume 2. That being said, I did find it interesting to see that what seems to be one of the main human antagonists is seemingly trying to save innocent people. Usually these types of characters are just trying to defeat the threat. They don't seem to care about the collateral damage, they just want to win. Here though, she tells the soldiers she needs Al because innocent people are dying. Thus, I guess they're trying to frame this character as somebody who will do what she thinks it will take to save the majority. A classic doing the wrong thing for the right reason sort of deal. It's not a very big scene, and I guess it's just there to showcase who our new characters are, and also show the military has a full base set up in the Upside Down, which seems rather insane. I mean, didn't there used to be spores in the air and they'd walk around in hazmat suits? What happened to that? Did the gate being open this long allow bad shit from the Upside Down to leak outwards somewhat and become less toxic, if that's possible? Then we come to another storyline I was not all that keen on. Hopper continues to be massively overprotective towards Al. She thinks that she was able to get under 12 minutes 30 on the obstacle course, and he claims that since he didn't see it, she isn't allowed to go on the crawl with him, even though I'd argue she is by far the best person equipped to do this. I mean, what the hell is Hopper's plan if he does find Vecna? Blow him up? That's his idea in episode 4, and it would only have a chance to work if Henry had actually been prisoner, which he wasn't. If Hopper ever finds him out in the wild, he would just get wrecked, and Al would be alone and have to do it herself anyway. So I guess I just find it frustrating they're running this back again, when Al is clearly the most powerful character in the show, at least on the hero side, and thus is the only person currently with a chance of fighting back against Vecna. I mean, we have them away from each other for a whole season, and their second or third scene back is already a fight where both of them storm off on each other. I guess I was just hoping for a bit more progress, but maybe that's just me. We do have a cute little scene with Hopper and Joyce where he explains his motives of feeling like he isn't closer to finding Vecna, and there are only soldiers in the Upside Down who all want to find Al, and thus it isn't worth risking her. At the same time, we do see he's going to try to suicide attack Vecna based on what happens at the facility in 4, although that might have been a spur of the moment thing given that he thought Vecna was stuck inside and he could get him. He is hiding the explosives from both of them though, so good chance he was always going to try this and it would fail, and they'd be up shit creek. Regardless, it was nice to have a cute Hopper and Joyce moment here considering they get separated for the rest of the volume, and we haven't had much of it to begin with. It's nice to see him being domestic is all. We briefly get the payoff of Dustin going to see Jake the Snake when the bully dude opens his locker and the snake's inside, which freaks him out and humiliates him in front of a big crowd. There's also graffiti inside the locker saying Hellfire lives, which will obviously have consequences and is going to play into Dustin's downward spiral. Here we come to what is probably one of my favourite scenes of the episode, where Mike comes up to Holly at her school and she confides in him about her imaginary friend trying to protect her from the monsters. This girl is a great actress, by the way, and whilst the age is a little bit whack considering how young she looked in the previous seasons, I think the recast has been good. This scene was also just nice to have Mike interacting with his family, as I feel he and Nancy really drifted away from that side of her character over the seasons. Mike especially felt like his whole arc has been about him and Elle with no room for anything else, so having him have this scene where he talks to Holly on her level and tries to make her feel brave by giving her a little figurine was so cute. He also claims he was going to wait a few years before he does this, so I guess this means he also intended to bring her into the world of D&D, which I find super adorable. We move on to a scene of Will and Lucas visiting Max in hospital, with Will talking to her about what happened with him feeling dizzy and then how the others might think it means that Vecna's returning on this next trawl. I really like this because it feels like this is a dynamic that hasn't really been explored in much depth at all. I mean, you get the idea that they were all friends, but you never saw it in action, so it's nice to actually see that with his visit and her talking to her when she's in a coma. He then notices that Lucas is really upset, and so he goes to grab a Coke whilst Lucas plays running up that hill, which was very cute and sad. I honestly feel so bad for Lucas across this whole situation. It must be really depressing. That being said, her room is pretty bare. Do we reckon her mum ever visits? Is her mum even still alive at this point? Wasn't she drinking pretty heavily? And also the caravan park is one of the gate hotspots since that's where Chrissy died. So maybe she was killed by that. Either way, it doesn't seem like she's visiting Max or leaving flowers or anything. There's just that one drawing on the wall, which is really tragic. We then get a scene that's pretty integral to Will's arc over the course of this first volume, and probably over the course of the whole season, really. When he goes to grab his Coke, he notices Robin go off into a side room at the hospital, and so he goes to find her and speak to her. Meanwhile, Robin's there to see her girlfriend. They have a cute little scene here where Robin says she's going to take her to Enzo's the next night to try to make up for having to miss their date scheduled for that night, since now they have to do the crawl. They have a really cute little moment here where they're embracing and kissing, and Will comes up to them and then creeps through the door before seeing them kiss, dropping his Coke and running away. Robin, of course, sees his jacket as he leaves. It's a minor scene on the surface, but it leads to Will and Robin forging a closer bond, which in turn leads to him having a lot of realizations and being able to confide in somebody. This in turn helps him go full sorcerer right at the end, which is pretty awesome. I love how such a little scene like this can have such a butterfly effect on the whole story in general. It's just really enjoyable when you look back on it all. It's then back to Dustin, and he turns up to visit Eddie's grave before the crawl and finds that once again, people have graffitied his tombstone. However, when he goes to clean it with paint thinner, I guess, he finds out that it isn't red paint, but actually blood. The blood of poor old Jake the Snake. Man, this actually pissed me off so much. They killed the snake, really? Are people actually like this? Because this is truly insane behavior to me, to just slaughter an animal and write in its blood. I kind of need these dudes to get killed by a Demogorgon now. I mean, this is just piece of shit behavior at this point. So whilst it's probably extreme that Dustin chucks paint thinner in their eyes, at the same time, they were going to beat him up as a gang, and you know what? Screw these dudes. Also, holy shit, this scene goes a long way in making Dustin seem like a major badass, doesn't it? He's kicking some ass very briefly before the numbers game get to him. In that way, I really love this scene, even though the poor little snake died, because it made Dustin look cool. Not sweet, not cute, not funny like he used to be, but legit just cool, which is what happened to the whole party previously. Lucas got his glow up in that awesome moment where he walks up on Andy at the school and intimidates him. Mike gets to be a cool leader character. Will gets the sorcerer moment and also that opening scene of this episode, and now Dustin puts up a massive fight against the bullies. Hell yeah. Also, Andy is not looking too good, so I'm thinking that maybe he goes to the hospital, and we know from the trailers, the hospital's getting attacked at some point. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, Dustin gets beat down severely, and since it's a TV show, he'll limp over to his friends at some point, but I reckon if this was real, good chance he's not getting back up, because this is brutal. Of course, he won't be limping in anytime soon, as by the time of the meetup, he hasn't made contact with the party, and they're all pretty worried, and he hasn't made it home either. So good chance he's just laying there in the cemetery completely out of it. In the meantime, though, we get a scene that I feel foreshadows the ending of the series somewhat. Up on the roof of the building, Al and Mike are talking about everything that's going on. That Hopper and Dustin aren't acting like themselves, and this is simply getting to everybody. That Will had a feeling, which in turn means that perhaps they're going to find Vecna, but Al clearly has doubts and is worried, which in turn makes her question Mike on what happens if they win. He talks about how in his D&D campaigns, the heroes never go back to where they're originally from, because so much has changed, and they're all so different and they need to start again somewhere new, but all together. I suspect this might actually be what happens. I think Hawkins is going to be wrecked by the fight, and so they're going to have to go somewhere else to start in a new place. That being said, unless some characters die, I don't really want to see them separate either. I think it would be nice to have an unequivocal happy ending, you know? Why does everything need to be bittersweet after all? Especially since so much of the story has always been so bleak, it would be nice to see everybody ride off into the sunset together. They're all setting up for the crawl, but since Dustin isn't there, Steve needs somebody else to ride in the back of the van to monitor what's going on. Will's the only person who really knows how to work at 100%. He tries to volunteer, but of course, Joyce holds him back and says he has to stay in the station with her. She's become massively overprotective, and so she tells Jonathan to go instead. Man, imagine being Jonathan. Your mum just doesn't care if you're in danger. Ouch. Also, it sucks that Will was slapped down in front of everybody too. That's gotta hurt. I know it's necessary for Will's arc this season, but this scene just made me feel so sad. On top of that, the fact that Joyce knows that Hopper could straight up get lost in the Upside Down if they lose the signal, and won't let the only other person who's able to do it, is insane to me. I'm glad that Will finally stands up to her later on, but here it's just like, ugh. I'd actually be pissed off if I was Hopper, to tell you what, but instead, they have that really romantic staring scene instead. Outside of Robert and Murray, the adults this season are just so deeply frustrating to me, although at least in the case of Joyce, I'm supposed to be like that, so you get the catharsis of Will finally standing up and saying enough's enough, your plan sucks. We briefly check in with Holly where her parents are arguing about her downstairs, and she starts to cry alone in her room, and yeah, feels like shit. She's only had a handful of scenes, but already you get attached to her because of her personality and the interaction she had with the different characters. It's so sad. Also, her putting the figure that Mike gave her onto the necklace was some of the cutest shit imaginable. That scene with them talking at the school really added so much to the story and feels like one of those butterfly effect scenes that are small at the time, but are gonna spiral the further along you go, like with Will at the hospital. Then the hype begins to slowly build as we work our way towards the crawl, because you know that despite them saying they've seen nothing over the course of 30 plus crawls, something big is gonna go down in this one. I loved this part where their plan's going off flawlessly and everybody's playing their part and Hopper makes his way in without a hitch. It's nice to see this sort of thing where they're a well-oiled machine, because in Stranger Things usually the story is built exclusively around madcap plans where they're running on hope, prayers and vibes. This was a good way to showcase how competent they've become, because they're pretty easily outsmarting the military and they have been for a fairly long time. Of course, the relief doesn't last long because suddenly the convoy crashes and Steve and Jonathan almost lose the signal. Then Will gets his feeling and there's this cool zoom in on his eyes that enters the POV of the Demogorgon, which charges out and attacks the soldiers, and yeah, this scene was just peak really. The Demogorgon's back, the soldiers are getting shredded, Will collapses, he starts seizing up. Now Hopper's alone out there with one and all the other soldiers dead and no way to contact home. However, whilst the Demogorgon leaves Hopper be, it still has another mission, to head to the Wheeler house to come after Holly, and lucky for the team, Will's tapped into its eye so he can see it happening. He wakes up and he tells Nancy, and so she and Al drive off to try to save them, whilst we see Ted hitting golf balls outside, Karen drinking wine, and Holly in her room when a portal rips open on her ceiling. Holy shit, talk about a cliffhanger. I'd forgotten how good that was. It really is the perfect ending because it makes you want to immediately jump in and see what happens next, which thankfully you can through the power of binge watching. Honestly, this is such a good episode overall in terms of its structure and story. The perfect return. Yeah, there are parts I wasn't a huge fan of, but I think for the most part, the episode's strength served to cover up those weaknesses. It was a really great start to the season and leads perfectly off into episode 2, but for now, these have all just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of The Crawl? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.